Hello, and welcome to Mapping the College Audition, a podcast where we explore the landscape of the college theater world and try to demystify this daunting audition process. I'm your host, Charlie Murphy, director of MTCA, that's Musical Theater College Auditions, and today we've got a Wednesday Addams of a show lined up for you, because we do shows on Wednesdays, and because of the Addams family. Krysta Rodriguez, who I know from teaching at the Performing Arts Project, is on the show, and she is just a ray of sunshine with her students and a blast to hang out with as a faculty. I hope you will find the same. Today on the show, we talked about the power of no in your career. We talked about pilot season auditions and how they work in LA, or at least how they worked back then. We talked about her Smash audition experience and some of the hidden fortuitousness of a connection. You might never know who's in the room. We talked about her resilience in fighting breast cancer and how that served as almost a rebranding experience for her. It's sort of like her grad school. We talk about playing Liza Minnelli in Halston, which she's fantastic in. If you get a chance to see, you can just Google Liza with a Z, not Liza with an S, whatever. And we talk a little bit about expanding your dreams into other artistic pursuits. But before we get to that, I'm just going to keep a really short intro today because I am playing a bit hurt today. These daycare diseases are eating me alive. So let's just jump right to the episode and a pre-recorded time with Krysta when I was feeling much better. No, we did talk on the episode. It was right after we stopped recording. But a huge congrats to Krysta. She was telling us about some of those irons in the fire, and it was her replacing as Cinderella in this Into the Woods, that's sort of star-studded Into the Woods that's happening on Broadway right now, alongside friend of the pod, Gavin Creel. So a huge congrats to her. I just hear she's amazing in the show, and I cannot wait to see it. Okay, let's get to this episode with Krysta Rodriguez. Well, we are honored to have Krysta Rodriguez on the pod today. Krysta is an OSHA student at Orange County School of the Arts. She also attended NYU, but did not graduate. Too much work for her to graduate. We'll talk about that for sure on the pod. She's been on Broadway in shows like The Addams Family, Spring Awakening, First Date, A Chorus Line, In the Heights, Good Vibrations, also lots of other cool theater stuff she's done. She's been on your TV screens in shows like Smash, Quantico, Daybreak, and most recently in Halston as Liza Minnelli, which Elizabeth and I very much enjoyed watching. She also started Curated, which is a design business that redesigns spaces. We'll talk about some of that. Krysta is also a breast cancer survivor and vocal advocate for that. And most importantly, she's going to be a groundbreaking member of the Two-Timer Club of Charlie Murphy podcasts, as we're going to do a home and home of both this and my Survivor pod. And we may do a little Survivor stuff on the pod today. Krysta, welcome. How are you doing?
Hi, I'm great. How are you doing?
I am so excited. We're combining two of my true loves in
I
theater.
know, I can't believe it. I also realized as you were talking, I only do TV shows that have one word in them on the title.
Well, at least those are the ones that I gave for the bio. I was
Yeah,
like, I skipped through it. Yes,
yeah, they're
Smash Quantic.
intense.
What
Yeah,
can I
those
say
are the big
fast?
ones, and I just really like to drive it home with one word.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. To smash it home if we dare.
Yay! There you go.
Why don't we go back a little bit? So I'd love to kind of talk. We mentioned OSHA. It's a performing arts high school. But talking about some of those early days, especially as you started looking at colleges, or maybe even just looked at like doing this professionally. Like, do you remember if you placed yourself in that 16, 17-year-old self or whenever it was for you? Like, what were you looking for in a college experience? Do you know that
Oh my
NYU was right for
God.
you, or what were you thinking about?
Gosh, I think about this all the time, that stressful position of being that age and feeling like your whole life is dependent on this decision.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember it very clearly. So my path was that I had gone to OSHA. I'd always wanted to be on Broadway and live in New York. That ever since I was 6 years old and I visited New York the first time. So that was like definitely the goal. And then my life took a strange turn when Francis Ford Coppola came to OSHA to direct a musical there. And he cast me as the lead in his musical Gidget. And so Francis Ford Coppola's there, Dermot Mulroney's there, Sophia Coppola is there. Like all of
Uh-huh.
these very famous people are hanging around Orange County putting on a musical with high school kids. And so there was all of this media frenzy that came around. And from then, somebody came to that and was like, you'd be perfect on this TV show. All of a sudden, I had an agent, I
Mm-hmm.
had a manager. I was going up to LA. I was trying to be the next, at the time, Lindsay Lohan, which is who everybody wanted to be. And so my priorities shifted to television. And so when it was time to consider colleges, I applied to UCLA,
Mm-hmm.
thinking, and at the time, I think, it was important to go to college, but it wasn't that kind of dire thing that it is now where kids are applying to 25 different schools or whatever.
Uh-huh.
So I was like, I'll apply to UCLA and I'll apply to NYU and we'll see which one I get in. And if not, I'll go to Santa Monica City College and I'll move up to LA and I'll,
Uh-huh.
I'll take acting classes and just do the acting thing. And then I ended up getting into UCLA first. And think my parents, I walked into the room, everything's decorated in blue and yellow. And it was like, for sure, they took us out to dinner. Congratulations, you're going to UCLA. I was a Bruin. And then I got this letter in the mail from NYU that was like, hey, we'd love to have you at the new student orientation. And I was like, what does this mean? And I called them and they were like, oh, you got that, but you didn't get your I would can't say for sure, but like you should probably be looking out in the mail.
This is your parents hiding the acceptance letter because they saw how much NYU costs. They're like, no, I'm not spending that. No.
Exactly.
Let's pretend it never happened.
Not really. They weren't hiding it, and it wasn't that. But when I finally got the acceptance letter, it was like, well, you're going to stay in California. You're going to go to UCLA, and you're going to
decorated the room.
Come on. And like, what do you and NYU's so expensive and then I got the next letter that was like, congratulations, your scholarship came in from NYU.
Ooh,
and so it kind of made it comparably, priced. And so I was like, well, now what? What do we do? And we went on vacation. We sat in a hotel room for days, like going over the pros and the cons and do I even want to go to college and all of these things. And I just remember where I was sitting in physics class. And it just hit me. And I was like, I got to go to New York. I've always wanted to go to New York. The time is now. It's not going to be later. I've got to do this now. And I sort of made the declaration. This is what we're going to do.
Obviously, you experience this moment of kind of odd success, or 16, 17, or whatever this is that at OSHA. But were you like consistently working already as an actor? Was it like, hey, I'm going to kind of go to school like while I'm working? Or did you envision going for 4 years and then graduating?
I mean, as soon as sort of things started picking up, I even went and got my my what they called proficiency diploma, I think at the time, my GED essentially in high school, just in case I ever had to leave, but I did end up staying. And in that way you could work as an adult at the time. So I was working and I was doing commercial work and I was doing, some other TV stuff here and there. But it wasn't, it was much harder. I was breaking into a new field and I don't know that I loved it in that way that I loved theater. And for a minute it felt like, oh, this is where it's going to go. But when I really had to think about where my heart was, it was in theater at that time, especially. And so that's what kind of made that decision for me. But yeah, I mean, I was always sort of hedging my bets. Like, I just want to be free to do whatever I need to do. So even in college, what I loved about being at NYU was that I was in the city and that I could go on open calls and I could, fail a bunch of times and figure out how to do it, totally. with the safety of a meal plan and the dorms and all that. I wasn't like showing up to New York with $30 in my pocket, which I admire the people that can do that. And I'm sure I could have figured it out, but I'm glad I didn't have to.
Totally. And it sounds like your parents were like super supportive during this time. Was there any, as you were doing the pros and cons, was there any pressure from them of like, hey, I really would love an academic degree, or, or don't worry about going to college. It's whatever you want for your life. Like, a lot of our parents will talk about like, I'm supporting the BFA path, but maybe I do want a college degree, or I want to make sure there's some, were they anywhere in that? Or were they just like, whatever you need for your life?
I mean, both of my parents, neither of them have college degrees. So it didn't feel like something that was imperative for the family lineage or anything. They had gone along just fine without one. And, but of course they weren't vocational. My mom had her own business and, my dad, worked in a mortgage company. So it was like very consistent work for them. They didn't have to, so they understood, and they were very supportive of my acting. My mom used to joke around when people would be like, how's Krysta doing? Oh, good. Just trying not to finish school. Like that was always the kind of the joke. So it didn't bother them. I don't think they worried about it. They had a lot of faith that I could do it.
And they're
But
looking at it just practically of like, hey, she's working, so it's only about, what's gonna keep furthering that work.
exactly. It's a kind of a matter of time. It's a return on investment. What happened to me was when I was deciding whether or not to go to college myself, I ended up that year looking at all of like my favorite actors that had won Emmys and had won
Mhm.
Oscars that year and all of that. And by and large, the large majority of them had not only college education in theater, but also mass graduate degrees in theater
Mhm.
as well. And so I was like, you know what? If those people are committing, because at the time, especially in LA, you're like you're wasting your youth. You're going
Correct.
off to school and you're going to whip
LA will
your
encourage you, yeah, do not go immediately to us. Do not go anywhere. Don't pass go. Do not touch
exactly,
school.
exactly.
Yeah.
And so to see that the successful actors were still ones that took the time to do the training, I
Mhm.
thought that was a good sign.
I love it. And then, so at NYU, of course, a big part of it sounds like it was NYC or, LA
Yeah.
and NYC was the two places you're looking. Were you also interested in like, you picked a very academic BFA. If of the BFAs, it's obviously a rigorous academic school. Was that interesting to you? Or was it like, whoops, I didn't realize I was going to have so much, gen
It
ed?
was interesting to me. I was always a good student. I always had, straight A's and stuff, and I enjoyed school, and I liked the idea of having other disciplines. But I think at the time it was just that the training itself at that school at that time was good enough that it was worth it. Because I also applied to Boston Conservatory.
Uh-huh.
I went to places where academics weren't necessarily a forefront,
Mhm.
and it just happened to be that it was going to be a great degree. Of course, didn't end
Still
up.
could be. Maybe we'll see. Hope, I'm with your mom, hoping you never have to finish.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, so then tell me a little bit about, so you show up, you're at NYU, now you're auditioning. What made you eventually now leave and go, I'm off to go do this amazing work?
Well, I got the end of my sophomore year. I was cast in Bye Bye Birdie at Encores, which
Mhm.
which offered me my equity card, which was a huge decision to make at 19 years old. Am I gonna,
Mhm.
go all in on only
Oprah.
professional work?
Yeah.
And it just became clear to me, at least in New York, because I'd grown up in California and LA, where theater, the non-equity theater, was prevalent.
Mm.
It was much more prevalent in LA to just not have your equity card. But when I
Mhm.
was in New York, it was becoming clear to me you weren't going to get seen at equity calls. You were going to maybe not get seen at the big open calls unless you had that card. So I went all in and did that. And I had to miss my last 2 weeks of my sophomore year in school,
Mhm.
but they were very supportive. They worked around me. They let me do my finals early, blah, blah, blah. Then that summer, I auditioned for Good Vibrations, which was happening
Mhm.
at Vassar, New York Stage and Film, and was ultimately going to go to Broadway. But at the time, I didn't even really know what that meant. So I just spent the
Mhm.
summer doing the show. Came back to New York, to NYU for my third year, and 6 weeks into that, got
Ooh,
Good Vibrations on
not the
Broadway.
6 weeks, not the full tuition paid. 6
Exactly.
weeks. Ooh, don't do
Exactly.
it.
You
Don't do
knew
it to
that,
me.
didn't you? 2 days after you could get it back. So I went to my counselor called me and was like, "Hey, you're gonna have to pay for this whole semester. Are you sure
Uh,
you want to leave?" And I was like, "I'm gonna be on Broadway. Of
Broadway,
course
come
I want to leave.
on.
This is why I'm here." I'm like, "I'm gonna have so much money. I'll just be able to pay it back." Cut to It's Good Vibrations, one of the
Yeah.
notorious flops. And I sort of knew that, but I didn't really know how anything worked. So
How can you know that at that
how can
age?
you
To be like,
know?
"Oh, cool, I know this is gonna be not worth it versus this worth it." I mean, and who knows about worth it? It led to
Exactly.
this great career.
And it was
Yeah.
worth it. I know I don't regret that decision at all. It got my foot in the door on Broadway. I taught me a lot. I was a swing, so I learned so much. And so then after that was over, I tried to go back to school, got another job. I got a
Mhm.
tour, tried to go back to school, and then got Spring Awakening. And by the third time I walked into the counselor's office, she was like, "Will you just leave
Just
already?
leave.
Just
Just you're
leave.
done.
You can
Come on.
reapply. You'll get back in. Maybe you want
Mhm.
come back when you maybe want to get a minor or get a different major
Uh-huh.
or something." So that's where we ended up.
I love, and so, yeah, did you ever strongly consider, maybe let's say years later, was there ever, I guess, kind of a trough in the peaks and valleys of your career where you said, you know what, maybe now would be a good time. I'm not booking work anyway. If the pandemic had happened, it might have been a moment for you at that point to be
Yeah,
like,
to be honest,
okay, well, what else am I going to do?
yeah, I really actually not even something else because that kind of came later. But I did consider going to grad school. At Yale accepts people in their grad program that don't have
Uh-huh.
undergraduate degrees. I
Uh-huh.
believe that that's true. It was, I think, at the time. And so I seriously considered it and was going to apply, because that's when I did feel like I was around 29, that I felt like, there are gaps in my training that I
Right.
didn't get. And I would like to go back. And now that I'm more mature and I can respect what I was learning a little bit more.
Uh-huh.
And then what we'll talk about, I'm sure, soon, is I ended up getting cancer, which was the same as graduate school.
Uh-huh. Basically the same as graduate
In
school.
a lot of ways, it did do kind of the same thing that I was looking to do, which is refocus me, ground me in a
Uh-huh.
different way, help me understand life in a more global way, and that's sort of changed my career as well.
Totally. Yeah. And the idea, the incentive to go to grad school for you, skill wise, was it about, I really want to focus on acting more than the other two disciplines? Was it like, hey, I already feel pretty good as a singer and a dancer, and I'm working in that world, but maybe I want more TV and film. I want more, I don't know if it's, you want to do Shakespeare, if you want to, was there something where you go, I want to go to Yale, which, is, I guess, MFA in acting would have been what you're looking at.
Yeah,
Is it because of that skill set wanted to be highlighted more, or just, hey, I
definitely.
want to be serious as a
Yeah,
purpose?
definitely that I wanted to highlight that more. It what it more was is that I had made my career up until that point. I was a swing and I was an understudy. I was in the
Mm-hmm.
ensemble. I had done a couple lead parts, but I was starting to feel my career go in a direction that I felt like it was unconscious, and I wanted to be more conscious and deliberate in the things that I wanted to do. And there was something about going to grad school that would not only help me learn the classics and things that I had not really immersed myself in, and be more focused on solely acting, but to also rebrand myself in the
Mm-hmm.
business as an actor, as
Mm-hmm.
not a musical comedy sort of
Uh-huh.
sidekick, sort of slapstick. I wanted to be taken a little more seriously. And that's why I say that sort of the cancer became sort of that same rebranding, was that people started to see that I could handle larger things in my life,
Mm-hmm.
and in the way that I could handle the gravitas of characters, uh,
Mm-hmm.
and started trusting me more without me having to kind of say, listen, believe me, I can do this. I'm not just a chorus girl.
I love it. And we'll get into a little bit more of brand and type
Yeah.
later as well. So great. It's fantastic. Just before we do that though, I'd love just to chat a little bit, because I think a lot of our young listeners, a lot of our listeners might be 19, 21, 23,
Mhm.
listening to some of this stuff. They see Krista Rodriguez and go, oh my God, I want to be her and have that career and all those things. I guess I'd love maybe pre-cancer, if cancer is a big moment of that trough of self-doubt and whatever, we'll talk about that experience. Could we talk about some of the peaks and valleys of, so you leave school because of work, but then I imagine it wasn't like work, work, work without any gaps. Like, were there some humbling moments of survival jobs and you going, what the hell am I doing? And when am I ever going to book the next show? When will I ever not be seen as an ensemble member? Like, can we talk a little bit about that? Because I think sometimes people gloss over that when they look at your career.
Yeah, sure. It's a little embarrassing to say that it was without gaps for a long
Oh,
time.
how dare you. Oh, how dare you. All
I
right, we'll
know.
cut that out of the episode.
I know, I know, I know.
Unbelievable.
So basically, I did Good Vibrations. I did the tour. I came back, and then once I did Spring Awakening, I overlapped with Chorus Line, In the Heights, and Addams Family. I did
Wow.
all of
Like
those,
job to job, boyfriend to boyfriend,
job to
no
job,
no skips, just
no
next, next,
skips.
next.
It
Wow.
was it was double duty every time, rehearsing
What a
during the
life.
day, jumping into the show the next day. I think between In the Heights and Addams Family, I had like a couple, like a month maybe, where I like went
Uh-huh.
on vacation, got my life in order, and
But and you knew you had the next thing anyway, so who
exactly,
cares?
exactly.
That's not a trough. That doesn't
And
feel
then
bad.
when I left Addams Family, I got my first pilot, so I went to LA.
Oh
Then
God.
then it stopped. Then it was
Okay. Here we go.
breaks, nothing. But I had had enough, surplus that I didn't end up needing to do survival jobs.
Mm-hmm.
But I've always done things within the business. I've taught, or I've done concerts, or I've done, things where you can get little stuff here and there.
Yep. I did
So
mention in our bio, I should have, sorry, that we teach together at TPAP, where I've
yes,
seen you teach many times. I've seen you at other places too, but yes,
yeah,
that you're also an awesome teacher.
thank you. And yeah, so there was that sort of back to backness. But what that back to back thing sort of did, and especially in the beginning of your career, you're making career moves, but you're just sort of
Mm-hmm.
also making just moves at all.
Mm-hmm.
You're starting to wade in this industry, and you're starting to be like, and for me, there were incremental. I was a swing, and then I in a flop, then I was a swing and a hit, then I was a lead in a revival, but a pretty
Uh-huh.
small lead. I did BB in a chorus line. Then I was in the ensemble of In the Heights, but I covered all the women. So I was in the
Uh-huh.
show, but an understudy.
And it's a hit.
Then I was a
Yeah.
lead in
Mm-hmm.
a, big show, but not the lead.
Yep.
And then I was so it was sort of going incrementally, but I remember even around Addams Family time being like, I'm starting to feel like I'm in a stream instead of
Yep.
directing the things that I want to do.
Uh-huh.
And that requires making the hard decisions and saying no.
Uh-huh.
And you can't always say no when you're first starting. And
For
so
sure.
it became, once you start saying no, you have to be careful. You have to be comfortable with sitting around for a while.
Yep.
And that's sort of what happened. And it happens more and more. I mean, I picked back up. I did Smash. I did First Date. Then I ended up doing a couple more things. But then, boom, I made a big decision. I chose to not do a big Broadway show that was going to
Mm-hmm.
be that could potentially be huge, because I was like, I want to be doing weirder, darker, off
Mm-hmm.
Broadway work. I want to be doing, I want to start getting my footing as being a lead in TV and all of that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't work for a year, and that was
Mm-hmm.
terrifying. So there are definitely those times where that happens, but I know that they're coming because I'm choosing to do a
You're
show.
choosing them. So for you, then maybe in the shape of your career, if they're not troughs, if they're sort of plateaus where you say, okay, cool, I'm not dropping down below this, or I'm not going to kick this left place. I think I trust that I'm going to be able to live at that level. Was there a moment where you felt like, I don't know if it was Addams Family, was it Smash? Was it, where was there a moment when you go, you know what? I think I now have enough cachet that I can start doing that I can say, no, I know the next job's going to come. I don't have to say yes. Like, what
Yeah.
was it? The third Broadway show? When did it feel to you like, you know what? I know that there will be more calls, and therefore something I watch Elizabeth do, and I'm so impressed when I'm like,
Yeah.
how can you say no to that? Like, that's a
I know.
lead in a Broadway show. Oh my god, But because it's just confidence to go, I know there's another one coming, and that one's not the best one for me, and I don't think that's right.
Yeah, I think like it's always really great to be wanted, and a bird in the hand is better than two in the bush, always. And so, well, not always. That's the saying,
The feeling,
and that's what you feel.
right?
Um, but yeah, I think it came around. I mean, Adam's Family, I actually turned down the first time, but not for Wednesday. I turned
Uh-huh.
down the ensemble because I
Uh-huh.
had auditioned for Wednesday, and then they didn't choose me, and they offered me the ensemble for a reading, and I said no, because I was like, this is when I have to start saying no. I'm now
I've done this
like
before. I want to
my
make the jump.
third show understudying. I'm
Yep.
done.
Yep.
And it was funny because one of the reasons they didn't cast me in Adam's Family the first time was because I hadn't led a show before. And so
Uh-huh.
I'm like, well, then I need to lead a show.
Yeah.
So
How do I lead a show if you won't let me cast me to lead a show if I can't ever do it? Yeah,
yeah.
exactly.
And so I had said no, but then my agents were sort of like, you know what? This is a 4-day workshop.
Uh-huh.
It's not that long. It's BB Newirth, Nathan Lane. They're in the room. You'll get to know everyone. Why don't you just go? So I decided to do it. And I think it was a great move for me. But
Uh-huh.
I wouldn't advise one way or another. If I would have said
Uh-huh.
no to that, they might have still come back. Who
Yep.
knows? But they did say that one of the things that they respected about me and why I got the part later was because they saw what a team player I was and how
Uh-huh.
invested I was in being a part of the show. So
Uh,
that's a digression a little bit, but the point. So that was the first time I had really said no,
Yep.
and then from that point on, it really was once I felt like, again, when I felt like I was starting to go, when I was just saying yes to things because they were coming, I
Yep.
would sort of take it back. But the big no was this big show that I
Do you
was.
want to reveal it? Can you say it, or is it
I
secret?
guess I was going to do Mean Girls. I was
Uh-huh.
cast in Mean Girls, and I have never said that publicly. um,
Breaking tea on this pot. Spilling tea.
yeah. I wanted to do it. I loved being in that room. I'd done the workshop. I was,
Mm-hmm.
ready to do it. And then there just was something in me that panicked. I
Yep.
really did panic. I would wake up in the middle of the night in a panic.
Because of the lane you were going to feel like now I'm trapped in this thing
Yeah,
again, and I've
and it's
done
a
this.
long, out of town plus a new Broadway
Mm-hmm.
show that is a hit is going to be a year and a half of your
Mm-hmm.
life. And at that point, I'm on the older side. I was going to be 36 when I got out of Mean Girls, and
Mm-hmm.
I felt like I didn't want to still be playing a high school student at that point. This was
Mm-hmm.
another thing where I was starting to want to do things that were my age, that felt that the stakes
Totally.
related to me and my age, and it had nothing to do with anything about the show. I just was like, I can't do this,
Yep.
and I have to say no.
It's
And
so it's
I
such an
did.
impressive confidence to do that. Because I love how you say it's always the bird in the hand that feels better. It's like
Yeah.
I feel like it is every factor will do that to us again if we don't let it.
Yes.
Like, well, now that I'm getting older, I actually don't know how many more parts there are going to be for an older lady,
Exactly.
or now there's a pandemic, and so it can't possibly, or God, there's only so many parts for people who look like me, or
Yeah.
whatever it is. It's sort of those
Yeah.
voices keep creeping back in, even if you
Yeah,
have a
and it was
confidence.
like, I worked a lot right after that. I immediately got a bunch of stuff and I was like, "Oh my god, thank God I'm
Hmm.
free to do this stuff." I got my first off-Broadway play. I was in a Netflix series. I did all this stuff.
Hmm.
But then all of that stopped and then Mean Girls
It
came
happened.
out.
Yeah.
So now you're watching this thing that you could have had and
Hmm.
it was hard. It's still, is a thing that I go, well, there was that lane and there was this lane and I picked one of them and I have to be okay with it.
So cool. All right. Well, that's a great place to take a little break. We'll run a couple ads, and on the back end, we're going to talk about some of these things we've mentioned. We'll talk about and play a little game as well. So we're back in a flash. All right. We are back with Krysta Rodriguez, and I'm our podcast producer, who's sadly not here, Megan, is a huge Smash head. So I have to ask about the Smash experience. I'd love to kind of hear, we've heard some fun TV and film audition stories, and I think some of this stuff is pretty unknown to the general public, where they kind of know how theater audition works, but I think a lot of young actors go, I don't quite get how you book a TV show. So I'd love to talk about maybe the audition experience, and then especially, like, it seems like from the outside, my guess is that your part is one that you might not have been auditioning for that whole role if you didn't know what it was, and it grew a little bit, and how that happens often in the ambiguity of TV and film. So tell me a
Yeah.
little bit about the Smash experience, and if there was a growth thing, I'd love to hear
Yeah.
about that.
Before I get into Smash, because
Uh-huh.
Smash was unusual, if you want like a typical thing. So
Give us typical, and then give us a, yeah, love it.
my first show that I got was a pilot for Fox. And that was, you go at that time, network pilots, you would go through the pilot season, which still exists, but is a lot less now that there are streamers and the kind of
Hmm.
TV schedule is all over. So you kind of start at the end of January, beginning of February, you get cast sometime in March, you shoot it in April, and you find out if it gets picked up in May. That's sort of the the thing. So
Hmm.
I had just left Addams Family and I booked this show. So basically, I went in for an audition in New York. They liked my tape. Then they flew me to California to do a test, which is where you go in for the studio first and then you go in for the network. And at the time, and it's less and less this way now, A, because of pandemic, and B, because of technology, um, you go in a room with 20 people, executives,
Hmm.
not like, you know, audience members.
Hmm.
These are suit people. And,
Hmm.
a lot of the times you're auditioning, or for me, it was always comedies, not always, but most of the
Uh-huh.
time, this particular one was a comedy. And you're told, like, they're not going to laugh. Do not expect a laugh. You don't go in. You're not there to shoot the shit with the people.
Hmm.
You walk in, you do your scene, and you leave. And a lot of times it's in like a screening room, so there's lights on you and it's dark. And this is where you separate the wheat from the chaff as far as the
Uh-huh.
theater actors, because this is where we shine. And
Uh-huh.
television actors a lot of times can just croak under these situations because you're having to do it live and for the camera,
Hmm.
and you're having to, like, all of a sudden perform for tons of people watching you. And this is where I just shine.
Mm.
So that was like the first time I ever tested for a pilot was earlier that pilot season. And I made it past the studio, but then so you go in for the studio and then they narrow it down from there and then you make it to the network.
Uh-huh.
I did not end up going to the network. They had also flown me out to California. So you're flying out to California for a 3-minute audition and then flying
Unbelievable.
back to go, do your show or whatever.
Yeah.
So then I did that again for this one. I did get passed on the network and then I got the job. We shot the pilot. The pilot didn't get picked up. And then I sat in LA and didn't work for a year. And then the
Hmm.
next pilot season, I was like, I'm staying in LA. I'm going to do this. I'm going to try to make it work. I tested for 4 pilots. So I went through that same process of
Uh-huh.
going in for casting, going in for a studio test, going in for a network test. And one thing I'll say, just for educational purposes, when you go in for a test, you negotiate your contract ahead of time. So
It's
you're
crazy.
completely, like, before you even go in for an audition for people, you have signed your contract
Uh-huh.
for 7 years. You have your salary worked out, what
Hmm.
your dressing room looks like, what your raises are, what your press schedule is going to look like. I mean, everything is laid out before you. And then you don't even know A, if
Right.
you're going to get the job, B, if the pilot gets picked up, C, if it gets canceled after a couple episodes. You have no idea. So you're banking on all of this every
And you have
time.
no power in negotiation, right?
No
They
power.
can't be like, you're like, they're like, "This is what I need." They're like, "Well, we don't even know if we want you
We
yet."
don't
Like,
even know.
what do you say?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. But so then, so I tested for 4 shows the next year, thinking like one of these is going to hit,
Mhm.
and it didn't. And
Mm.
so I and then I got a call from my co-op board. I don't live there anymore, so we can spill the tea on that. Call from my co-op board. Hey, we heard you're subletting your apartment.
Oh,
We're either
no.
going to like fine you, sue you, or you have to come back to to New
Sue
York.
you? This
Yeah.
feels aggressive.
So I was like, I guess I'm coming back to New York.
It's a sign. Yep.
And I was literally like on the way to, I was like, had booked the flight, all my bags were packed, and my agents were like, they want you to test on this other show here. And I was like, okay, maybe I'm not going back, and then
Uh-huh.
I don't get it. And I was like, okay, LA, I was leaving already. You didn't have to do this like
One
final
more
nail
smack on the way
in
out.
the
Yeah.
coffin. So I head back, with my, tail between my legs and my bags. I go back to my apartment, and I'm there for about 2 weeks, and I get an audition for Smash. And I'm like, oh yeah, whatever, cool, fine, that'll be fun. And it was a series regular. It was a fractional series regular, which means it was
Uh-huh.
7 out of 10. So they guarantee you 7 out of 10 episodes. Even if there is 23 episodes, you still could only get 7 of them.
Mhm.
But then they can add you into more of them as you go. So, so I went in for the audition, and it was the showrunner, Josh Safran, who I had
Mhm.
never met. I came in, and he was like, "Oh, hey!" I'm like, "Hi." He's like, "I wrote your episode of Gossip Girl." My very first television show I ever did in
Yes.
2007 was a guest star on Gossip Girl. And I was like, "Oh, well, thanks for writing that makeout scene with Chase Crawford." And he was like, "No problem." And he's like, "I also know Joe Iconis. I go to Joe Iconis concerts and stuff. I've seen you and all these things." So this like little connection that I didn't know about theater and
Uh-huh.
this one TV thing. And so I auditioned for him, and then didn't hear anything back. And a week and a half later, they called with the offer. I didn't have
Wow.
to test.
No
I didn't
testing, no.
do anything. And then I got to negotiate after the offer. So I
Much
did have a
better.
little more leverage. So yeah, so that was the whole process, and that was a really big deal to just kind of outright be offered that show. But that connection with him
Uh-huh.
and all of that led to that.
And they knew your theater goodness
Yeah.
as well.
And
Did
Joe
did
ended up being on the show as a
Mhm.
composer, and we ended up singing Broadway Here I Come, which I was the first person to sing Broadway Here I Come
Mm, mm, mm.
for Joe. So it was like all circle.
So cool. And
Yeah.
did you know, so it sounds like maybe you did actually know early on kind of what the scope of your part would be. My
Yeah.
experience watching that show, that could be completely erroneous as a viewer of it, was like it seemed like, oh, these people are interesting. Let's go in this direction. It seemed like they were going in a bunch of
Yeah,
different, we
it's
don't know
true.
where
I
it'll develop.
wasn't Yeah, I wasn't in the 3rd episode. Like, I would kind of come and go in the beginning because it was a
Hmm.
fractional. But then I ended up, I think, becoming after that, they wrote me in
They
everyone. So I
liked
could
you.
have
They
been in
really
that.
liked you.
Yeah. Like, there was like one day at a table read, they were like, "Are you afraid of heights?" And I was like, "I don't think so." They were like, "Great." Next week I get a script. It's like me flying from the ceiling doing like acrobatic silk
Yes,
number.
yes,
And I
yes,
was like,
yes.
"Oh, so like this is amazing. You're giving me this huge part. And also no one else here would have done this."
They negotiated their contracts for
You've
no
chosen the
silks, basically.
eager child to be like, "Yeah, yeah, yeah, I'll get up on a
Oh, for
silk
sure, for
30
sure.
feet in
I
the
can
air."
do it. Oh,
Yeah.
no problem at all.
Yeah.
Bees? I'm good. Let's do bees. Yeah,
Let's
fine.
do it.
Okay, let's get to, not to bring it down too far, but I'd love to talk a little bit about the breast cancer experience. So that
Yeah.
happens, is that right after Smash or right before Smash?
Pretty much right after Smash. I was actually right after First Date. First Date
Uh-huh.
dovetailed from Smash, and then we closed that in January. I got a pilot that year that didn't go, and then I then got cancer I turned 30 in July and got cancer in September.
And so, like, obviously, you're going through this personal experience, and I know you talked on. There's a blog which we can post
Yeah,
in the show notes about all some of the struggles with questions like fertility, and we obviously are still a very young woman when this happens to you, and
yeah,
all that. I guess I would also be interested in, like, as a pretty successful actor already at that point, did you feel a responsibility to be a public figure about it? Or I guess what made you the decision to say, "Hey, I'm going to go through this publicly," as opposed to like, "Hey, this is a private tragedy, and I'm going to deal with it on my own, and it's I'll reemerge if I'm healthy or whatever." But it seemed
yeah.
like you did it not knowing for sure what the end result would be.
Absolutely. I mean, I was sort of told right at the top that I had a favorable kind. So I had the
Uh-huh.
confidence of the people around me that, this is a fight we fought before. This is not an unknown battle.
Uh-huh.
So I felt I had that going for me. Of course, it's terrifying and anything can happen and anything can still happen. But it was something where they were looking at me as if I was already going to be healthy, which is a huge thing that I would advocate, looking for a doctor that sees you healthy instead
Mm-hmm.
of sees you sick.
Mm-hmm.
So I initially did keep it to myself. I told, a few people very strategically. And like I said, I was diagnosed in September and I didn't tell anybody for a long time. Even when I had started chemo, I didn't tell a lot of people, even though at the time, when I was diagnosed, it wasn't certain that I was going to have to do chemo. And I
Mm-hmm.
immediately got a job. I worked immediately through it, didn't tell
Mm-hmm.
anybody because I thought, if I don't have to lose my hair, if I don't have to look sick,
Right.
then I can keep working. And I needed to because I needed health insurance.
You need
Thank
health
you,
insurance.
America.
And are you at least worried that if you say, "Hey, I have cancer," people are like, "Ooh, maybe let's not make you do silks or do
Mhm.
whatever the thing." When you're like, "No, I'll still work.
Right.
I still want to
I
do
didn't
stuff."
want to be a liability. Plus, I was
Yeah.
doing fertility treatments at the same time. So I was
Uh-huh.
directing a musical at OSHA when I was
Mm-hmm.
diagnosed. And then I was doing fertility treatments. I was going in the coat closet and giving myself shots while they were on
Unbelievable.
10-minute breaks. And then I got this movie in New York and I read the first page of the script and I was like, yeah, I'll do it because I needed the health insurance.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
And so I did that. And then January rolls around and they tell me I have to do chemo. And I'm like,
Uh-huh.
okay, this is going to be tougher and to hide this. And then this was really pivotal. Actually, I was seeing, I think it was Newsies. They'd shot Newsies for the movie in LA and I was
Mm-hmm.
there doing treatments and I hadn't told anyone. And somebody came up to me and they were talking to me and they put their hand on my leg and rubbed my leg and looked me deep in the eye. And they were like, hey, how's your pilot season going? And I was like, uh, 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 like I didn't even know what to say. I was like,
Uh-huh.
A, I've forgotten it's pilot season. B, I I can't believe how important you think pilot season is with what I'm going through right
Uh-huh.
now. And C, like I I can't fake
Yeah.
that pilot season is the most important thing to me anymore. And it really dawned on me in that moment that like this whole thing is getting out something from your body and
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't interested in hiding anything anymore. Like
Hmm.
keeping something a secret was actually going to be more detrimental to me than being open about it, whatever the risk of that might be.
Mm-hmm.
And so I told my agents, I said, okay, I'm gonna do chemo. I'm probably not gonna work. So I'm gonna start this blog and I'm see what it's like to be a writer for 6 months.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and it really came out of it. You do have this instinct to want to be an advocate for something, and yet you're so tired
Oh,
and
I
you're
can
like
only imagine.
taking on so many things. I imagine I'm not a parent, but I imagine it's very similar to like having a kid. Like there's so much you want to do and instill, and but it's like you're just exhausted, and you hope that whatever you're doing is taking, and
But
so you.
unlike being a parent, you also had the public eye. Like, I mean, I guess
But I
technically
chose
there's
I
not zero
chose
public
that
eye.
for sure, but
But I even mean just that they're young women who might look up to what you choose to do.
yeah,
Like that's, I guess, the awesome responsibility or whatever. If you're saying, "Hey, this is what I'm doing today," there might be some 19-year-old who also has cancer who's obsessed with Smash or obsessed with whatever Wednesday, and is saying,
yeah.
"I want to be just like Krista," and that feels like. I mean, if I
Well,
had a
what
parent like that, of like that's people are going to parent how I parent, I would be much more, even
Yeah,
more
I mean,
exhausted.
I think like at the time, what's funny though is when I was diagnosed, I was like, no other 30-year-old woman has ever had breast cancer. And
Huh.
so when I was writing the blog, it mostly was for me because I wanted to feel like fashion was always really important to me. And I was starting to see how these things were attacking what I believed to be my femininity. And so that was my
Uh-huh.
way of taking control of that. And it was a way to sort of update people. Hey, this is why I don't exist for the next 6 months. Like,
Uh-huh.
this is what's going on. I actually didn't even think it would help people. I
Huh.
didn't know it would help people. I didn't think it would be relatable to anyone. I honestly thought I was the only person in the world that was going through this at the time. So the blog coming out and kind of taking off the way it did, the thing that I never estimated was the response coming back, the
Uh-huh.
amount of people that I would find was going through this, and the amount of advice I was getting for them, and the amount of help that I could be to them and they were to me. That was a complete byproduct that I was not expecting.
So cool. Well, what if we jump to Halston
Yeah.
and this other cool offshoot that you've done? So now you're shooting this really awesome Netflix show as Liza Minnelli, which it's awesome. I think it's available now. I'm saying Netflix though. Is it Netflix? Is that right? Yes.
Yeah. Hmm.
But then you were shooting in the middle of the pandemic. It stopped shooting when the pandemic
Yeah,
happened.
we started in February 2020, and then we shut
Hmm.
down in March, as everyone
Unbelievable.
else did. And then we came back in September of
Uh-huh.
2020 and finished through December.
And is it between those two moments that you said, "Hey, I'm going to start doing this design thing. I'm
Yeah.
going to start doing this." So tell me a little bit about that. What inspired you to do that? I mean, it seems like you're not doing enough in your life already. My God.
I don't know. Okay, well, okay, real talk. The Halston was a dream and also so hard for me.
Uh-huh.
I made it very hard on myself. I put so much pressure on myself. I had so much anxiety around it. The people were incredible. My director was a genius. I would follow him to the ends of the earth. And
Hmm.
yet I was at home twisting myself into knots, like trying to get everything perfect, knowing because, again, real talk, Smash is like kind of beloved now, but at the time it was the
Uh-huh.
punching bag of both industries,
Uh-huh.
theater and film. And I was one of the few people, a couple of us were the ones that had to return back to theater and be like,
Uh-huh.
hey, can I come back here? Are
We're
you
not sitting on Will and Grace money or whatever.
Yeah,
You're saying, yeah,
exactly.
yeah.
I'm not just like gonna now do another movie. I'm gonna come
Hmm.
back and do Broadway. And so to tackle Liza Minnelli when you're in the Broadway community, if you're
Uh-huh.
someone who's never gonna do a theater piece again, you don't ever have to hear whether you were a good Liza Minnelli or not. If you're gonna go walk into Glass House, you're gonna
Uh-huh.
hear if you were a good Liza Minnelli or not, And so I was so nervous. And so that month leading up to shooting and the month of shooting, I liken it to like you go to the grocery store for the week, but you don't use a cart.
Uh-huh.
You're
Just
like,
holding it all.
you got the bread in between your chin. I'm just like carrying everything I know about Liza. And then all of a sudden we stop and I just go, what do I do with all of this?
Uh-huh.
I had to drop it. It just had to like fall to the ground.
Hmm.
And I never knew if the show was coming back. I never knew if I would act again, all of that. So all of this stuff that I had built up. But one thing that I had been so inspired by was the era of which she was in and her clothing and the design of her home and Halston's clothing and his home and all of
Uh-huh.
this stuff. And I thought I'd always been interested in design. My mom's a broker, a realtor. She owns her own realty company, and she offers staging and stuff. And so I had gone through a breakup during the pandemic, and so I went home to California, and the real estate market, as most of us know, was booming. And so
Uh-huh.
people were wanting to sell their house, wanting to buy houses, wanting to fix up houses, wanting to change their rooms. And I just started kind of doing it with her and realizing, I I stay up sometimes all night long imagining the design of a room.
Huh.
And I haven't remembered the last time I did that with a role at that point,
Uh-huh.
besides stressing about it, besides
Uh-huh.
like gripping it so hard and stressing about it. This felt like a creative outlet that I have done my whole life and never really monetized or formalized. And so I just thought, you know what? I'll do it. And if Halston comes back, it would be a great time to launch a business. It's a great, cross promotion.
Yep.
And
Smart.
then Halston came back and I had much more ease with it. I had much more perspective of the
Hmm.
priority that it took in my life, knowing, and this is something that I will say to the younger people that are listening to this, and you might not get it until later. And I think you understand it, and I'm sure Elizabeth understands it. The dream expands as you get older.
Mm-hmm.
And the dream has to expand to
Mm-hmm.
become a well rounded, mentally safe person. And what I realized is like Halston is a dream, but it can also be the precursor to a different dream, which
Mm-hmm.
also leads me back to other dreams. The dream of traveling, the dream of owning a home, out, the dream of designing places, the dream of having a family. All of
Mm-hmm.
those things become the dream. Where it used to be move to New York and be on Broadway,
Mm-hmm.
that can't sustain you. And so I had a healthier perspective of Halston when I came back, when I trusted that the work I had done was in me, when I was creatively fulfilled in other ways, and when I knew that it was going to buoy another dream, which would
Uh-huh.
then buoy more dreams. And that was a huge thing for me. And now I design when I want to, I don't have to. I
Hmm.
also don't, if I'm not working, it's something that I can do that feels good, but I don't have to work if I want to design,
Hmm.
and it's really been really symbiotic in a way that's been great.
It's so cool. And what a prime example of it. You hear this sometimes with actors who sort of the research that they're doing sort of
Mhm.
dovetails into like, and then they research doing a poker player. And now they play poker. Or now they do this, their professional athletic thing that they research for
Yeah.
a role. Very cool to see. Like, that seems like some of that research actually
Yeah,
ended up
and
paying
like
off for you too.
Susan Egan is a big mentor of mine. She went to OSHA and she
Hmm.
has like taken me under her wings so many times. And I remember her telling me one time that the roles that you play, you have to treat them as if they're coming to your life for a reason, and you have
Hmm.
to be curious about what that reason is.
Hmm.
Maybe it's to make you braver, maybe it's to make you more financially stable, maybe it's to make you, unleash a more primal side, maybe it's
Hmm.
to learn how to be more communicative. I mean, there's everything. And all of the roles I've played have come into my life when I needed them and have taught me to be who I am.
Ugh, that is such good advice. I love it. And now, when we talk about your more primal side, I do
Yes.
think we have to get to our survivor game. So, as you'll know, as a fan and a frequent listener of the pod, we play a unique game with all of our artists. Sometimes they're wacky, sometimes they're simple. They're all kinds of different things. This one is very cheesily named, and I hope with a gentle nod toward your breast cancer. I'm a survivor.
Yeah.
Um, of course, we've got to. And so it's going to be a mix of trivia and fill in the blank and all this kind of stuff. You'll see it's a pretty simple trivia
I'm
game.
so nervous.
What I'm going to try to do to kind of keep you inspired is I'm going to Jeff Probst style kind of coach you as we go. So if there's any pauses, you get some Jeff Probst style
You're
coaching,
gonna do
which is one
something
of my
like,
favorite things.
Krista is nowhere near finishing her puzzle.
Don't worry,
She's
I'm ready for that.
blowing this challenge.
Wow, they're really behind.
Yeah.
And be ready for the twists you'll never see coming. Okay, here we go. We're going to try this Survivor trivia game. Krista, for those of you who don't know this, and if you're not Survivor fans, just skip ahead 5 minutes in this podcast. Though,
Or become
listen
a
to
Survivor fan. What are you doing with
correct.
your
Go listen
life?
to our episode of Come On In Survivors, and you will become a Survivor fan, as I did in the pandemic. But Krista, you're an old school Survivor fan, so you've been
Yeah.
watching 20 whole years. We're going to see what you remember some of these times long, long ago. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. Yes.
Do you want to know what you're playing for?
Yes, of course.
Yeah, it's for pride and nothing else, because that's what we give out on podcasts.
But
Okay,
I don't have to ask you if that's worth playing for.
yeah, was it worth playing for? Yeah,
Yeah, you
I
always
really
like,
want. This is one thing I want. I want someone to say no one time to him.
yeah,
Worth
yeah, yeah.
playing for? Not
Not
really,
really.
Jeff. I want immunity. Okay,
Yeah.
I'm gonna start you off with a really easy one, just to kind of level set and see how deep down the dark path we're gonna go.
Okay.
There are two players in Survivor history who have won the game twice.
Oh,
Who are those players?
Tony and Sandra.
Tony and Sandra. The
Okay,
quickness of your response gives me a lot of
good.
encouragement that we're gonna go deeper and you're gonna do great.
Okay, we'll
Here we
see.
go. Survivor trivia. You're doing great. You got to dig deep. Mike White, runner up on season 37, is a successful actor, writer, showrunner. He was that before Survivor, but after playing, went on to be the eponymous show writer for which HBO show?
White Lotus.
The White Lotus, 100% correct. You're 2 for 2. You're
Yeah,
doing great.
good. Mike should have won, by the way. Should have won.
Oh, we had a big debate about. So Ethan and I did season 37. That was our off-season pod. I
Yeah,
think Nick was a worthy winner. He agreed. He thinks Mike should have won. He
Mike
was a big
definitely
fan.
should have won.
Fantastic game he played. All right, another successful Survivor TV writer. Which alum and winner is currently writing on Star Trek Lower Deck after writing for shows like The Millers and Kevin Can Wait?
Cochran.
John Cochran. You're 3 for 3.
Yes,
You're
love
doing
Cochran.
great.
Big Cochran
This
stan.
challenge is on. Okay. Number 4. Billed as Broadway actors on Survivor, Josh Canfield and Reed Kelly played together on Survivor 29. That was Blood versus Water. What were their respective finishes? And I'm going to give you some multiple choice because that's hard otherwise.
Okay. Yeah, this one's tough.
So A, Reed 5th place, Josh 12th place.
Uh-huh.
B, Josh 10th place, Reed 7th place. C, Reed 8th place, Josh 11th place. Or D, Josh 13th place, Reed 9th place.
I think it's A.
It is C. Reed was
Damn.
8th, Josh was 11th. That was a very tough
That
question.
was a tough one. I do remember stick to the plan. That's
Stick to the
how
plan for
that's how
sure.
Reed got out.
I really was rooting for them. I wanted them to win.
Yeah.
But beautiful, weird season. Okay, for
Okay.
bonus points,
Okay.
why is it blood versus water?
Oh, well, I mean, this is kind of confusing, but I
It's
guess
weird, right?
blood is thicker than water.
Blood is
Is
thicker than water, but
is
what's
this
the water
right?
in this example? Blood is like
I think it's
family,
Yeah,
and
I think
water is
it's like your
relationships?
family people. It's like, is your teammate gonna outweigh your family?
Your family. But
Yeah,
wouldn't it be like blood/water versus money or something? Like, isn't that what's more important? Like, I'm like, is water money in this
but I think
situation?
they make a lot of choices where you have to choose your tribe
Right.
or your loved
That's
one,
true.
and I
Water is
think that
tribe, you're saying.
yeah, it's like water is tribe, loved one is
All
blood.
right, that's a
That's
pretty
what I
good explanation. I buy that. There was no right answer there, except that sounds pretty good. Okay, we're gonna keep it going. What contestant has spent the most days on Survivor? Most total days on Survivor.
shoot.
It's not easy.
This isn't easy, and I think it happened recently, and I
Ooh, very
think
good.
I think it was a girl. No,
No hints. I'm not giving you hints.
okay, shoot.
You gotta dig deep, Krista.
I
You
know.
gotta dig deep.
Not Candace.
It is Boston Rob.
Not the
Boston
That was
Rob.
gonna. Dang it!
I
That was
gave you almost a non-hint by
good.
saying it was hard because actually it wasn't so hard. It was
Yeah,
Boston Rob and then Parvati and then Ozzy. Ozzy was just
That's
passed.
the girl I
Ozzy
was
was
thinking
number
of.
one for a while.
Parvati was the girl I was
Parvati,
thinking of.
who we
Okay,
love.
great.
We
And then
love
Ozzy.
Parvati.
Ozzy was my first thought, then Boston Rob. Okay, I had the right ideas. Dang it.
I'm
Okay.
gonna say,
I hate
Krista,
this.
you're still whipping through this challenge. I'm just gonna say that. Okay.
Okay.
How many people, and it's gonna be multiple choice, have quit the show? How many people have quit the show Survivor? Is it A 6, B 9, C 13, or D 18?
Quit. Not airlifted. Not like
Quit.
out of the quit.
That means I said I'm out. I want to leave.
I might say 6. I'm battling between 6 and 9, but I'm gonna say 6.
It is 13. C is 13.
Whoa.
Okay, the last question, your chance for this is your redemption island right here, Krista. This you got it. This you got to put it, leave it all on the line today, right now. That's how you do it on this podcast. Let's go. Okay, here we go. There are 3 players in Survivor history to have played what is called a perfect game, meaning they never received a vote against them and won the final vote unanimously. So no one ever voted for them and they got 100% of the vote. There are 3 players who have done that. We're calling it a perfect game. Can you name one of them? One of the 3 perfect games.
You
Oh, Yule.
Yule?
Yule did not win. Did not win unanimously. No, Ozzy got some votes in that season. The 3 answers are JT, Cochran, and Denise, who's one of my favorite players ever.
I love
Denise amazingly did so while appearing at every single tribal council in her season. That's a fun fact.
Wow. I did not know that.
Okay, for bonus redemptive points to win all the points back in the game, what would your Survivor audition video be? Have you ever considered auditioning, and what would it be if so?
Yes. In the early seasons, my friend John and I, we went to CBS and waited in line to apply.
Yes.
Didn't get in, and then he made a tape where he like did Survivor things around his house. Nowadays, I don't know what I would do. Maybe I would like do a music video or something. I would like put together, like get my singing talents in there, and like create a song or something. But they really look for disparate things in those tapes. Some things that catch your eye, but also just like, hey, I think I'm gonna, be good at this. So I don't know. What
I'm
would
charming and I'm beautiful and whatever.
Yeah.
I have no idea what I would do, but I have to say I was honored that like we've had a number of podcast listeners submit using our theme song. So we have like an edited theme song to our podcast, which basically it's the whatever Ancient Voices, but it's got like a cool remix to it. Who they've submitted using that as their backtrack.
So maybe I will.
Maybe you could. You could be the 4th.
I have definitely come to terms with I would not be good on Survivor.
No, I wouldn't either. I would be good at the game. I would not be good at the island.
I wouldn't be good at the game. I would be too hungry to think about the strategy. I would get cranky.
Yeah.
No one would like me. My social game would be crap. Like
I get bug bites. I don't think I'd look good with the shirt off. Like with the I would have scratchies on my skin.
And all the bugs and I can't do it. The reverse temperatures, I can't. I would do Amazing Race though. I have tried Amazing Race.
Okay, let's put this forward. Today we're putting it forward. Amazing Race producers, I know you listen to this podcast.
Yeah.
Let's get Krysta on Amazing Race.
Mm-hmm.
Last but not least, we want to wrap up. We've talked about mentioning type a little bit or brand a bit. We've been doing a runner on it for the past number of episodes. Different kind of artists. We talked with a bunch of different people from different walks of life. And I just love to kind of hear how this consideration has like affected your career in terms of how you're selling yourself or how you're thinking about yourself, whether it's the word type, whether it's the word brand, but have you thought about how you're trying to curate or package yourself for the industry, and what has that happened throughout your career?
Yeah, I think the thing that I ultimately want to do, and this is something that I kind of talked about with expanding the dream, is sort of be unpinnable. I just want to, people always ask me, like, the most common question I get, what do you like better, theater or film? What do you like better, theater
Hmm.
or TV? And I'm like, I don't like anything better. I want the role. I want
Hmm.
whatever role. And if that role is in a black box in, Duluth, or if it's a radio play, or if it's the role of creating the like character of a room, like all of those things are the same to me.
Hmm.
So and because of that, I like that my brand is sort of disparate. I like that I do a lot of different things, and I have all my little thingies and a lot of different stuff. So but that came from just like staying true to myself and going with the decisions that that I liked. So I I feel like that's that move.
Yep.
But I also, was told early on, just accept who you are fully. Like, really get to know, like, find the people in your group who you trust. If it's your family, or if it's a great friend, or if it's a mentor, a teacher, whatever, and listen to them when you start to hone the things that either you're really good at, or that you're not yet good at, or the things that are not your strongest thing.
Hmm.
And there are some things you need to push harder on. And sometimes when I'm never going to sing like Idina Menzel, so I'm just not going to try to
Hmm.
sing like Idina Menzel, and I'm going to sing like me. And when what you want is my voice, I'm the only one.
Hmm.
Like that, you're going to get me, and I'll get that job. If what you want is Idina Menzel, I was never going to get that job. So let that go. So that helps in the branding, is to be like, have somebody there to tell you, no, you can belt, you're just afraid, or no,
Uh-huh.
you can do this emotional scene, you're just blocking yourself,
Uh-huh.
or hey, you're not quite like, let's put this foot forward, and put these other things in the back, and no, these aren't going to be the thing you lead with.
Well, I love that. And I guess in terms of what foot you put forward. So in service of that brand of this, I'm this unpinnable artist who can do everything. I just love to hear, like, how much do you feel like you lead with yourself
Yeah,
versus your representative? I
yeah,
feel like during the pandemic, we saw a lot of like, these weird Zoom interviews where like then you had to like get all this hair and makeup on and pretend like you didn't put hair and makeup on to do it. Like, there's some element of falseness always when you're selling yourself in any of these
yeah.
sort of media hits. I just love to know, like, how much of that do you feel like, are you thinking about a conscious thing, or are we really meeting Krysta as you actually are?
I think you're mostly meeting me as I actually am. I certainly like, I think what happens when you teach or when you do interviews a lot, you end up sort of feeling like your life is a set of stories rather than
Hmm.
things that you've experienced. So, and this was something that I learned with the blog, is that sometimes you need a little distance to have perspective to finish the story. So I think that's the difference between interview me and regular me, is that
Uh-huh.
regular me is on the fly and might not have the perspective, and might not react perfectly in every situation, and might not have that like, and this was a great idea and look how it worked out, that sort of
Uh-huh.
positive energy that you can have when you're packaging the story of how it all turned out. So I think that's maybe the smallest difference between like interview me and regular me.
Yeah.
I'm also
A
terrible.
faithful narrator, even if you're doing
Yeah,
some authoring, but it's still a truthful narrator of what
exactly.
your story is about.
And I think like I am terrible at social media. I post very few often. In fact, that's one of the biggest hurdles between me and branding myself at all and my
Hmm.
new business, is that I'm phobic of self promotion and the internet. So I think it's harder when people feel like they have to create a brand first before they get out there. And I didn't
Uh-huh.
have to do that. So I'm sympathetic of needing to like brand yourself first and create that. But I would encourage that brand to stay as close to yourself as possible, because you'll just never be able to keep it up. And part of going into an audition room is showing yourself, because
Hmm.
they're looking for someone they want to spend 6, 8, 9, 10 months with,
Hmm.
6 years with. Same with a TV show. You might be on that show for 10 years. So the more you can show your personality, and if it's a good one, then the better you're going to be, because you're not going to be able to withhold that brand for 10 years. It's just
Right.
not
If
possible.
it's a false thing. Well, you might not get producers of The Amazing Race coming to you, but you're going to get some social media interns who are ready to run your
Yeah.
social. You're going to get
Okay.
some DMs from this. I
Come to
promise you that
me.
it's going to happen.
I'm
All right. My
ready.
last question to you, and then I'll let you go. And thank you for so much wonderful
Yeah.
time. I would just love to hear if we have some young artists out there who want to be Krysta Rodriguez when they grow up. What do they need to do? What advice would you give to a young artist who's like, I just want to be just like Krysta? She's amazing.
I would try to access, this is stuff I teach a lot at TPAP, try to access the thing that makes you uniquely you. And again, kind of like what I said before, don't be trying to be, I know that sounds cliche, but in practicality, you have to start like getting into your depths.
Mm-hmm.
You have to stop performing and start listening to what you're trying to say with this art form, whatever art form it is. And, I think that it's a big deal when you make that switch between what I call the dance for grandma technique, which is just
Mm-hmm.
like doing, shuffle ball changes and being like, here's how I sing and look at how cute I am. It's
Mm-hmm.
like the second you get rid of that, that's the stuff that I wish I would have learned earlier. And what I think every time I tap into that, I hit a chord with people that resonate with the work that I'm doing, which is to tap into the story you're telling and how you are the unique person to tell that story. And I think that one of the things, if I can kind of sound like I'm tooting my own horn, that I take pride in and that separates me from a lot of people is my ability to act in song. And that's
Mm-hmm.
what I teach,
Mm-hmm.
is that like, this isn't a song. If you wanted to sing a song, you could be a recording artist.
Mm-hmm.
This is a heightened monologue. And how are you using the tools that are already in your body, and mostly in the lower half of your body, your diaphragm, the energy, your chakras down there, how you're getting those out is how you're going to affect change, and not how you're smiling and falafel changing. So, if any of that made sense, I hope that you can take all of that and become the newer, better Krysta Rodriguez.
It made perfect sense. It's fantastic advice. Anything you need to plug? I saw there's a new pilot on the gram. You don't post much, but I did see a pilot coming up.
The pilot happened. It is not going to go further as a
Okay,
series.
well then
So
nobody
that's
should care
fine.
about that pilot.
No,
We'll
don't
just
anybody care about it. There are maybe some things a brewing, so stay
Oh,
tuned. I will put them on social, so stay
we're
tuned for
brewing
the
and
social.
stewing.
Depending on when this comes out, it might already be brewing.
Okay, great. Well,
Brewed.
if it's brewed since we've talked, then we'll throw it to the show notes. If it's like, oh
Okay.
my God, she's on this amazing thing. Krysta, thank you so much. It was
Yeah.
such a pleasure getting to chat with you.
Thank you.
Hey now, I hope you enjoyed listening to Krysta Rodriguez. I just find her to be so warm and whip smart and funny. I'm going to do another short outro because, as aforementioned, I am not at 100% health here right now. I got a little bit of a fever. I'm a little loopy, so don't take too seriously anything I say right now. But I just did want to talk a little bit about the power of no. I think it's such a tricky balance, right? Krysta gave a really great example of when you might use no. But I think you've heard other guests kind of really encourage the yes and attitude, right? It's so tough to know as a young artist when to draw that line for yourself. And certainly for some period of your career, the answer should generally be yes, unless it's something that's endangering your safety or is beneath your dignity. But as you work more and more, if you feel yourself getting boxed in, like Krysta, you may find yourself a moment of no, right? It really comes down to that expanding dream Krysta was talking about, which I think is such a great quote. If the dream goes beyond a Broadway ensemble member, which might be where it is right now for a young person, at some point you might have to say no to those jobs to create the space for that amazing yes to happen. Or if the dream does maintain as mostly about consistent work, you might choose, a la the great friend of the pod, Cameron Addams, to stay consistent with your ensemble work and build a great reputation on the back of a lot of great paychecks. For the college process, I think it's worth thinking a little bit about too, for those parents who are listening and the students who are listening who are still auditioning for colleges. Just check in of, do you find yourself saying yes to every activity because your high school director tells you feel like you have to and you're burning the candle at both ends? If you're not sleeping, if you're not eating well and making yourself sick, I'm one to talk, the pot calling the kettle black. You're definitely putting yourself at a disadvantage in this process. So you need to have the emotional approach of a yes and attitude when in the rooms, but also try to find the boundaries of being able to say no where that is for yourself in this process. Because if you say yes to everything, you will overwhelm yourself and run yourself into the ground. If you do the college process well, hopefully there will be a number of schools at the end that you get to say no, thank you to. So it's a little bit of practice to say, no, I can't do that. I'm doing X, Y, and Z, and I just can't do W. It's just not possible. Well, if you enjoyed this episode on a W and want to hear more, please hit that follow button. If you appreciate me playing through pain in my Jordan flu game today, throw us a 5-star rating and review. You can also follow me directly at Charmer7, where I feel a post coming any day on Instagram. It's really going to happen. I believe in it. If you're interested in working with MTCA for help with your individual prep for your college audition journey, please check us out at mtca.nyc and follow us on our social media, which will be available in the show notes. To my young artists out there mapping their journeys, don't believe Krysta for a second. She would be deadly on that island. We'll see you next week.